This is Baron Glass, host of the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass on the all-new #1 global radio station, WMAD. Before I do my live broadcasting, I always dine in at the all-new Main Street Seafood Restaurant located in downtown Columbia, Louisiana, owned and operated by Miss Brett. Check them out. I did. Hello, my name is Baron Glass, host of the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass on WMAD 24-hour global radio and Waco 4-state community talk radio. When looking for talk radio, there are many things to consider. We believe that we are the best source to bring you a wide variety of topics: the rights of women, civil rights, social rights, constitutional rights, and all other rights we have as citizens. The goal is to link all communities to one station. We believe when people talk, we make a difference. Tune in Monday nights, latest night at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Hello, and welcome to the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass on WMAD live broadcast. There's been a debate that's been going on around the country for a while, and that is the legalization of medical marijuana. And as most people know, and some people feel, that medical marijuana, not just medical marijuana, but marijuana as a whole, has been an illegal drug for some time. It is a natural herb that is grown, but some people receive side effects and so forth and so on from that. And the side effect can be minimum or maximum, depending on the person who's dealing with it. Now, what we're going to talk about today is both chambers of the Louisiana Legislature. They have now approved what we call medical marijuana legislation that seeks to give certain patients who need its access for the drug. Now, the House of Representatives, I believe on yesterday, June the 4th, they approved the vote by 70 to 29. Again, it was approved by 70 to 29. Now, here's the deal on this bill. If the bill happens to become law, Louisiana will, I believe, become the 24th state in the country, plus Washington, D.C., where patients have legal access to medical marijuana. The question is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? The state will also become the first in the Southeast to have a legal medical marijuana dispensary system. Now, I believe Governor Jindal has already told reporters sometime last month, back in May, that he would sign the bill, and the bill was sponsored by Senator Fred Mills, a Republican out of New Iberia, if it gets to his desk. And we are one step closer for the bill to get to his desk and possibly be signed. Now, what happens is the last step before it reaches Governor Jindal's office is a vote from the Senate to approve amendments tacked on to the House side of the bill. Now, that body endorsed an earlier version of the bill back on May the 4th by a vote of 22 to 13. So it's an overwhelming majority that's out there now who feels like medical marijuana would be a benefit to go ahead on and legalize. Now, if you have any issues or concerns, you may contact your state senator, and the state senator for the 32nd district is Senator Neil Reiser, a Republican out of Caldwell Parish, Columbia, Louisiana. And Senator Reiser can be reached by talking to his legislative personnel in Caldwell Parish, which is Annette McGuffey. Again, the Senate has approved the bill by a vote of 70 to 29, leading this way to go before the governor's desk for signature. Now, we also know that while the legislature legalized marijuana for medical purposes way back in 1978, and I believe then again in 1991, there was no mechanism in the current law that allows for the legal dispensing of the drug. Now, when we look at the Department of Health and Hospitals, they were ordered to write rules for dispensing it nearly 25 years ago, or a quarter of a century. but the rules never adequately implemented the intent of the legislation. Now, doctors can legally prescribe it, patients can legally use it, but patients can't access it in the state legally. In short, the system really likes a middleman. And that legislation was Senate Bill 143, and it gave authority to 3 state boards to set rule and regulation to a tightly constrained system. Now, again, the question is this a benefit to the state to legalize medical marijuana? When we look at State Representative Helena Marino, a Democratic out of New Orleans, who presented the bill for Mr. Mills on the House floor, they were fielded with questions for more than an hour. It was noted that Mr. Mills sat behind Representative Helena Marino, taken off to the side with the House members who walked up to him during the debate to air out their individual concerns. Now, some lawmakers, including Representative Mike Huval, a Republican out of Breaux Bridge, he spoke from the election about loved ones who could have benefited from medical marijuana. Again, there are pros and cons to medical marijuana. And all we're doing today on the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass is providing you information pertaining to what's current and what has basically taken place within the last 24 hours. We are not taking a position one way or the other in favor of or in opposition of. The lawmaker said that he wished his brother had medical marijuana to help him through his chemotherapy. He believes that it kept him alive, or it would have kept him alive. Now, the Thursday's floor debate was centered on who would get the contract to grow the marijuana. And I believe that can create one of the problems. Who can actually be the ones that can grow the marijuana? Now, the terms of the contract and whether or not the bill was just a seizure to legalize marijuana for recreational use is one of the concerns. Now, Representative Marino said that she wanted to remind all what this is about. Okay, and she says that this is about helping people who are literally begging us to help them finally stop their suffering. Again, has it been concluded that medical marijuana can help in glaucoma? I believe it has. If you look at all the information that's out there, all the statistical data that's out there, again, there are pros and cons to this bill. Okay, and again, I believe the bill is out there, and if you have any concerns, you may want to contact your local state senator throughout the state of Louisiana. Now, lawmakers have been watching voting boards and different other places, and all the while during their debate, there was red lights lighting up. There was green lights lighting up, and there was a lot of applause that broke out on the floor as this bill was being debated down in Baton Rouge while they are still inside of their legislative session. Now, let's take it a step further. Here's how this system would actually work. Now, those with prescriptions, they would be able to obtain the drug in a non-smokable form. Again, a non-smokable form, like oils or pills, at one of the places where this would be sold. Now, the bill right now authorizes one cultivation site. Now, the cultivation site was originally supposed to be it would have been selected through a public bid process, and we all know how public bids work. But an amendment was added at the floor, House floor Thursday, which gives first priority to LSU, Louisiana State University, or Southern University Ag Center to host the sites if the centers want the job. The bill would restrict the use of medical marijuana to patients from glaucoma, quadriplegia, and those undergoing chemotherapy treatments for cancer. Now, however, the legislation requests that the Louisiana Board of Medical Examiners submit recommendations or other qualifications conditions or diseases. Now, again, we're looking at things such as epilepsy and the AIDS virus. Now, we also know that some of that stuff would be a benefit and some of it would not. Now, the Louisiana Board of Medical Examiners would set rules about prescriptions. The Louisiana Board of Pharmacy would set rules about the way that it's the dispensaries. And the Louisiana Department of Agriculture would set rules for a single cultivation site. So we have three individual agencies that would have to coexist. And then, as I stated last night in the broadcast, when you have all of these individual agencies, and if you have a majority of one from one party and one from the other party, the question is, can you move the ball down the court or can you get legislation done? And if you look at the federal government, from the president, the Speaker of the House, the majority leader, when you look at how government has not been able to function very well, that may create a question or at least some type of concern for those who are out there listening. Now, Representative Patrick Connick, a Republican out of Marrero, he tacked on the amendment giving the LSU and the Southern Ag Centers the cultivation contract after a number of lawmakers expressed uneasiness over the idea of a private entity landing a huge state contract to grow marijuana. We all know what type of problem that could create. Possibly a very profitable venture is what was stated. The apparent potential for shady dealing prompted Representative Kirk Talbot, a Republican out of River Ridge, and he brought up the Riverboat Casino license scandals of the 1990s, and he stated, and I quote, "That was a nightmare. Should the Ag Centers refuse the cultivation site contract, an amendment added by Marino on the House floor lists specific processes for the selection of the site and spell out provision that must be included within the contract. And they did add a sunset clause that will force the legislature in 5 years to readopt the law. Now, the 5-year expiration is intended to give lawmakers the opportunity to explore the impact of legal access to medical marijuana and possibly reevaluate the system as a whole. And I think we all can agree that the reevaluation process is something that is very beneficial. Now, we can also look at, how this got pushed through the legislature. I believe Representative Mills or Senator Mills is a pharmacist by occupation and became aware of the structural holes in the state's medical marijuana law when he was director of the State Pharmacy Board back in the late 1990s. When other states started legalizing medical marijuana in recent years, he received more calls, and this time calls as a legislator, not as a pharmacist. He sponsored similar medical marijuana legislation back in 2014, but it was killed by a large margin early in the process in the Senate Committees on Health and Welfare. Now, this same committee this year endorsed the legislation without any objection from any member. Now, in 2014, this same committee rejected it. In 2015, the same committee endorsed the legislation without any objection from any member. The question is, what was worked out? How was it worked out? How did this deal get done? Who was involved? So forth and so on. We want to make sure that there was no underhanded shadiness going on within this. Now, he attributed the shift of support from last year to this year to the fact that the Louisiana Sheriff's Association worked with him to get the bill into a posture in which they felt comfortable removing their opposition. Last year, the group opposed the bill vehemently, according to the words of Louisiana Sheriff's Association Executive Director Mike Ranatza. The sheriff's group did not officially support the legislation, and their official stance was neutral. A symbolic show of support during a hearing on the bill, explaining that the system that was proposed was crafted under the compromise with the organization which is known as the Louisiana Sheriff's Association. Ranatza also said that he wishes, a colleague's daughter who suffered from pancreatic cancer inspired him to consider removing opposition that would have effectively shielded the bill from passing. Now, we also know that other individual people have had problems and concerns, with this, and the medical marijuana has been able, to help them throughout, the situation. Even though no one is pushing recreational marijuana legalization, groups who clearly support that agenda have lobbied other lawmakers on behalf of medical marijuana bills, scarring some legislatures off. Now, we know that the House Health and Welfare Committee Chairman Scott Salmons, Republican from Abita Springs, mentioned at the committee hearing that some characters he deemed questionable reached out to him. Then they asked the question, are we jumping on the bandwagon with the roll 'em and smoke 'em attitude that's going on out west? Mills assured him that his bill will not open the door to recreational use. He has often noted Louisiana's proposed dispensary system would be the most tightly regulated medical marijuana system in the country. Again, he assured them that Louisiana's proposed dispensary system would be the most tightly regulated medical marijuana system in the country. He says that it's a safe and secure and responsible way to dispense medical marijuana to those who are suffering and need it. Some lawmakers were undeterred in their insisting that medical marijuana was a step closer toward recreational legalization, and I believe that's the concern that people are having. Medical marijuana dispensaries could be seen as a way to get the infrastructure in place to sell recreational marijuana if or when it becomes legalized. For example, let's look at it. Dispensary sites in other states that formerly only distributed medical marijuana prior to the legalization of recreational marijuana now sell both versions post-legalization. It was asked that please do not send a message to the rest of the country that Louisiana is on its way to legalizing recreational marijuana. Because this bill, that's what you're doing, is what some believes and some are contesting. Representative Terry Landry, a Democrat out of New Iberia, the former head of the Louisiana State Police, countered Mack's claim about the danger of marijuana as an addictive gateway drug by saying the FDA-approved drugs in your mother's medicine cabinet led to more dangerous drug use like heroin addiction. This is not about medical marijuana, Representative Landry said. This is about human suffering. So we're getting off into whether it's about human suffering or whether it's for recreational use. And we do know that a lot of people are actually using using marijuana rather for recreational use. And to them and according to them, it provides, some type of relief and relaxation and so forth and so on. On the floor, more lawmakers spoke in favor of the bill than against, and we can see the trend has gone from one side of the fence to the other. Many of those who expressed concerns had them addressed through answers or amendments, and that's how you move the ball down the court with conversation, with the pros and cons, bringing everybody to the table, and hopefully reaching some type of result. Medical marijuana advocates who push for the bill have cited a problem with language in the current version they say could prevent patients from accessing the drug. Now, here it is, because the marijuana is a Schedule I narcotic and is not approved by the Federal Drug Administration. Doctors in other states where medical marijuana is legal write their patients recommendations for medical marijuana, not prescription. Here we are. We're getting to where the rubber meets the road. Let me make sure that I state that again. Because the marijuana is a Schedule I narcotic and is not approved by the Federal Drug Administration, doctors in other states where medical marijuana is legal write their patients recommendations for medical marijuana, not prescription. The legal distinction allows a doctor to recommend medical marijuana to patients and pharmacists to fulfill it without threatening the doctor's FDA, Federal Drug Enforcement Administration certification. So now it appears that there's a conflict between the federal and the state laws. So we hope that this can be ironed out before there's any signature from the governor's office. Now, the legal distinction allows a doctor to recommend medical marijuana to patients, again, and pharmacists to fulfill it without threatening their license. The House committee made the fix sometime last week, but it was undone on the floor. And Marino's explanation that the pharmacy board indicated the word prescription would not be a problem. Representative Mills said he plans to follow through with the regulation agencies to make sure the law is actually implemented if it is passed. His aim is to prevent another quarter-century loophole for patients who can't get their hands on medical marijuana, even though it's technically already legal. To him, he said, when you pass legislation, you've got to make sure it's a practicality, and that makes sense to me as well. Within an estimated 2 years before the intent of the proposed law will come to fruition, plus some lingering issues that might require actions during next year's legislative sessions, patients waiting on the drug will remain, at least for a while, in limbo. Now, we know that there are laws on the books that deals with medical marijuana and deals with marijuana rather. Marijuana possession and the sale of manufacturers are regulated by both state and federal laws, and that's around the country. In one state, I believe it's Iowa, if I'm not mistaken, marijuana is classified as a Schedule I substance, which means that it has a high potential for abuse and no generally recognized medical value. Now, you can look under the Louisiana Revised Statute 40:964. That's the law itself. However, despite being a Schedule I drug, Louisiana may allow medical marijuana use under limited circumstances. While not covered, it is also a crime to drive under the influence of marijuana, period, in the state of Louisiana. Now, you can go, if you want to find out any more information about this, you can go to Louisiana medical marijuana laws, and they will give you specific information, and you can look at driving under the influence of marijuana in Louisiana, just like driving while intoxicated or driving under the influence of alcoholic substance. Now, marijuana possession is a crime knowingly or intentionally possessing any amount of marijuana, including small amount for personal use. You can find that under the Louisiana Revised Statute as well. Now, for the first conviction, the penalties include a fine up to $500, up to 6 months in jail and or both. The second conviction, the penalties include a fine of between $250 and $20,000, up to 5 years in prison or both. Now, the third or subsequent conviction, the penalties include a fine of up to $5,000, up to 20 years in prison, or both. The probation, when you look at that, the judge may order probation in lieu of or in addition to penalties described that I just mentioned. And now, if the judge orders probation, the defendant will be required to take part in a court-approved substance abuse program and to complete 4 8-hour days of community service. The offender will also be required to pay any costs associated with those activities. It is also illegal to cultivate marijuana plants or distribute any amount of marijuana in Louisiana for possession or with intent. Now, the penalties may vary, and the defendants who otherwise would be eligible for probation must serve the minimum prison sentence described before becoming eligible for probation. Now, you can find that in the Louisiana Revised Statute as well, and I'll give you some indication just in case you may have this on your mind. Now, if you have up to 60 pounds of marijuana, the penalties include a fine of up to $50,000, between 5 and 30 years in prison, or both. Between 60 and 2,000 pounds, the penalties include a fine between $50,000 and $100,000, between 5 and 30 years in prison, and or both. If we look at between 2,000 pounds and 10,000 pounds, the penalties include a fine of between $50,000 and $100,000, between 10 and 40 years in prison, and or both. 10,000 pounds or more, the penalties include a fine of between $400,000 and $1 million, between 20 and 40 years in prison, or both. Now, let's look at the worry and the concern of some who work out there in the field. Selling to a minor. Anyone or someone who sells marijuana to a minor who is at least 3 years younger than the seller may be punished with a double penalty. For example, selling less than 60 pounds of marijuana to a minor would incur a fine of up to $100,000, between 10 and 60 years in prison, or both. Now, when we have drug paraphernalia, okay, it is illegal in Louisiana to distribute drug paraphernalia. Paraphernalia includes items used in growing, harvesting, processing, selling, storing, or using marijuana. The penalties, they vary according to whether the violation is a first or subsequent offense. The first conviction, the penalties include a fine of up to $500, up to 6 months in jail, or both. The second conviction, the penalties include a fine of up to $1,000, up to 1 year in prison, in jail, or both. Third or subsequent conviction, the penalties include a fine of up to $5,000, up to 5 years in prison, or both. Now, does Louisiana impose a stamp tax on marijuana? And the answer is yes. A stamp tax is a tax imposed on certain types of transactions, such as transfer of property, for an example, that requires a stamp to be purchased and attached either to the item sold or to instrument documenting the transaction, such as a deed. The federal government imposes stamp taxes on deeds, the issue and transfer of stocks and bonds, and on playing cards. In Louisiana, those who buy, transport, or import marijuana to the state are required to pay a stamp tax and place the stamp, the proof of payment, onto the contraband. However, because the possession of marijuana is illegal, people typically don't pay the stamp tax. Those who are convicted for possession will also be liable for payment of the unpaid taxes, $200 for each gram or portion of gram. And that's under the Louisiana Revised Statute. I believe it's section title 2601 or section 2601, but you can look it up under Louisiana Revised Statute. Now, the advice that's given in the state of Louisiana, the value of legal representation is always necessary, regardless of the circumstance. If you have been charged with a marijuana-related offense, we ask that you consult an experienced criminal defense attorney. While the penalties and consequences of a marijuana charge are governed by statutory law, only a local criminal defense attorney can tell you how cases like yours will tend to be handled by prosecutors and judges in your state courthouse, your local courthouse, and so forth and so on. We have been talking about medical marijuana moving one step closer in the state of Louisiana. You've been listening to the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass on WMAD 24-hour global radio. We're going to pause and take a short commercial break, and we'll be right back.
At Horace Auto, we don't just repair parts, we restore pride. From oil change, brake repair, or full service engine repair, give Horace Auto a chance to work on all of your automotive repairs. Horace Auto is owned and operated by Chris Howard, located in downtown Columbia, just off 165 at 235 Meredith Street, Columbia, Louisiana.
Racism. The belief that all members of each race possess characteristics or abilities specific to that race, especially so as to distinguish it as inferior or superior to another race or races. Baron Glass, host of the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass, each and every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on the #1 global 24-hour radio station, WMAD. Join my co-host April Ayala and I as we make an attempt to bring this evil system and a way of life for some to the forefront and have an open discussion with civility and honesty, with hopes of minimizing this problem that has affected so many lives. We ask that you join us. We all can make a change, and we surely can make a difference. We are back once again, broadcasting live with the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass on WMAD 24-hour global radio. Want to make sure that we understand that we're talking about medical marijuana legislation moving one step closer in the state of Louisiana to having the signature of Governor Bobby Jindal and making it legal to have medical marijuana in the state of Louisiana. So we want to make sure that whether you're on the pro side or the con side, to contact your local state senator to get as much information as possible, get the specifics on the bill, and make sure that you have a clear understanding, because the one thing that we don't want to do is put something out there hoping that it's good and end up creating a greater drug problem than we have already, because we do have kids who have access to parents' prescriptions already. We do have kids that are out there doing marijuana, doing crystal meth, and doing all these other drugs that are out there. And every time you look on the national news, you always see these things happening that's going on. So at the Smoking Glass Hour, what we're doing is we're bringing all of this local. We're bringing stuff from the national level and the state level right in your living room on the local level. And we want to make sure that you are well informed, well tuned in to what's going on in your surroundings here locally. Again, you've been listening to the Smoking Glass Hour with Baron Glass on WMAD. Thanks for tuning in, and stay tuned for the next broadcast. Have a great and wonderful Friday afternoon. Have a good day.